Ooh, good morning, beautiful people. Welcome to Babz LoveTalk on Babz Rawls-Ivy. It's Samara Joy Day. It's Samara Joy Day. She will be here tonight. And guess who will be in the house? Me. So I'm delighted to see her. So if you have not gotten your tickets, they turn loose some more tickets. Um, it's already like over 1,000 people going. So I think the house holds about 1,500, 1,400. So get your daggone ticket so you can be in the house. Because I'm going to tell you something. She's a two-time Grammy Award winner, and you're not going to want to miss her because in a few short years, the tickets are going to be outrageous. Because she is quickly moving to superstar status. So I'm just saying, and I just think she's a tremendous talent. I cannot wait to see her again. I was hoping to talk to her this week, but she's got a tight schedule. But I will see her in August anyway, so there's that part. And I'll be up close and personal with her then. So it's exciting. So this morning at 9:30, this happened so quickly, I'm surprised. So I see Tambira Armand at the Juneteenth New Haven festival in the Dixwell community. And she listens and she said, I listen to your show just about every day. I think I have some folks who would be great on your show. So I was like, okay, who? So she said they just wrote this book and I think I believe she said they're Yale people. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, anyway, so I go and find out it's Louise Story and Ebony Reed. So they have this new book out called 15 Cents on the Dollar, How Americans Made the Black-White Wealth Gap. And I thought it was going to take me a long time to get them on. Child, I sent the message to Vera introduced us. I responded like a day later because my schedule was ridiculous too. And I respond like 1 or 2 days later. They get right back to me and say, "Oh no, we could come on tomorrow." I was like, "Whoa!" They are that means they are serious about getting the word out about this book. So what is 15 cents on the dollar? Well, typical Black families in the United States have 15 cents on the dollar compared to typical white families. It's a figure that has not changed all that much in generations. And this new book explains why and how that might be changed. Now, they're not the first people to talk about this, but I think it is timely considering we are in this crazy moment of political unrest and foolishness and all the things. So they're going to come on and they're going to talk about the wealth gap, the black-white wealth gap that is in our country, how to see it, how to pay attention to it. I would imagine how to move through it. When George Floyd was killed in 2020, like many people in the country, they felt catalyzed by the moment to dig deeper on the historic and contemporary issues surrounding Black-white inequity. I'm reading from their press. So through hundreds of intimate interviews, street reporting, academic research, reviews, data analysis, and historic primary documents, we dug deep on the Black-white wealth. So I'm delighted to talk to them because I had Colleen Shaddix on and her co-writer about the book that they wrote around the gaps in wealth in this country and poverty. And then I think there's another guy out there that's talking about poverty, and I think he might be on the show at some point. And we got to be looking at this, and I'm just excited that there are people talking about this, you know. So their book, and they got a new book coming out, but no, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. So I'm always delighted to be having these conversations about wealth because these are the real conversations. So Colleen Shattuck and her co-author, they wrote Broken America. So I would imagine that this could be married to this 15 cents on a dollar. Like it could be a wonderful marriage of talking about this. Broken America, seeing, understanding, and ending U.S. poverty. So and I read that book and So I'm delighted to talk about these things because we are in an election year, and we are consumed with the celebrity and not enough with the reality of things. We have an education crisis. We damn sure have a housing crisis. We have a lot of, I guess the word now is unhoused. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I think we've got to get to the heart of things. So anyway, Louise Story and Ebony Reed are coming on to talk about their book. And I just want to get to the part where they talk about why this is necessary. And can this message be heard with all the groundswell of all the other foolishness that's going on in this country? But they're doing a damn good job of getting around because I've been watching them on Instagram and all the spaces. So they are having conversations about this in some really good spaces. So I'm very excited. So they're gonna be on at 9:30. Whew, I'm a little hot. And if you hear noise in the background, I'm getting a new refrigerator this morning, and we're excited. So and I took everything off the top of the fridge. Now we just there's not much in the fridge to take out of the fridge because the fridge really doesn't work that well. So we had to take stuff out. So are they coming through the back door?
Yeah, I'm about to leave. I have class.
Okay, is Gregory on top of it? Just get everything out the fridge. If you have to put it in the sink, put it in the sink. Just put stuff in the sink to hold it till the new fridge gets set up. Listen, this is live TV and I'm at my house. So this is how this goes down. So anyway, that's where we are. So I'm delighted to talk to them. Louise is a prize-winning investigative journalist who spent more than 15 years at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, where she was the top masthead editor running coverage strategy. And her work investigating corruption led to the largest kleptocracy forfeiture in U.S. history, a scandal known as the 1MDB case. And so her work during the 2008 financial crisis led to a multi-billion-dollar settlement in the derivative market and the Goldman Sachs SEC settlement. So she's seen a thing or two. She's been up close. She's been up close and personal with how money runs and works in this country. Who has it, who doesn't have it, and who is hoarding it and who is playing fast and loose with it. And then Ebony Reed is a seasoned journalist leader who has led coverage and operations with a focus on community news. She began her career as a reporter at the Plain Dealer, covering Cleveland public schools, documenting public education inequities, with her work recognized by the Investigative Reporters and Editors Organization at the Detroit News. She managed local coverage during the 2008 economic crisis, and now the chief strategy officer at the Marshall Project. I know the Marshall Project. And she has held other senior roles at the Associated Press, Boston Business Journal, and the Wall Street Journal. She's taught at half a dozen institutions, including co-teaching with Louise at the Yale School of Management. Come through, Yale School of Management. So they're going to be on. So I can't wait to have a conversation with them about how they really said we're going to talk about money inequities and the Black wealth gap. And you cannot talk about the Black wealth gap without putting some historical structure around it, right? So this is fascinating stuff. So are they coming through the back? Mm-hmm. Okay. You might want to slip a. So anyway, you got everything out the freezer? It wasn't much in there, so sorry. Live TV. I got people in my house coordinating stuff. It's when your studio's at the house. So listen, early rather than later, I say. Early rather than later. They're gonna get it in, get it out, and then we'll set it up and do whatever. So what, the fridge? Okay. We have to mop it up. Well, they're gonna take it out first, right? It's just gonna pour. Okay. All right. So listen, this is a great day. If you've never listened to this show, today's a good day to listen. Because you get some of my home life, you get me excited about Samara Joy, and then you get me excited about having a new fridge. So that's 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 where we are. That's where we are. So the weather might be good. Have a good day. And my youngest daughter is running off to college, gonna go to her class. So listen, the fun never stops here. We are the architects of a good time at 103.5 WNHH. And we're live streaming on Facebook and YouTube, New Haven Independent, WNHH Facebook page, the New Haven Independent Facebook page, my Facebook page. I think I'm tagged. So, um, uh, so so you can so you might have to take the refrigerator doors off. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's going, so you can take the doors off. I think by law you have to anyway. So, uh, oh, there's a lot. There's a lot of moving parts. Lots and lots of moving parts. Uh, so anyway, if you're up at the New Haven Independent site, you know that the pop-up, the protest pop-up tents are on the green. I don't know how long they're going to stay there. It's Wednesday. They popped up on Monday. So I don't know how long they plan on staying. There's a whole festival going on. Not to say that we should ignore the protest for the festival. I'm just saying both can exist at the same time. That's all I'm saying. And it might be good for people to sort of see this and have conversation with people as they walk by about what needs to happen, and how we can support and deal with and eradicate unhousing. I don't know what we're doing in this country. We can't ban firearms, but we damn sure could ban books. You know, we don't want women to have agency over their health care, but we don't want to give them health care. We are at a moral crossroads in this country. And we've been in a moral crossroads throughout history. We were at a moral crossroads for slavery. We were at a moral crossroads for civil rights. And we were at a moral crossroads for a lot of different things. And somehow or other, uh, we had courageous leaders who had a moral compass to think what was in the best interest of the whole country. It's hard to see the moral compass right now. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just means it's hard to see. And maybe it requires each and every one of us as citizens to be the moral compass, right? And not to look for something outside of our communities to be the moral compass, that each of us has to be the moral compass. And in being the moral compass, advocate for the well-being, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everybody in community, no matter status, economic wherewithal, no matter immigrant or naturalized or whatever it is, whatever the divisive lines are, whatever the walls are, the moral compass calls us to break those barriers and sort of see people as people, that we are all here together and that we can all thrive together, and that we could make that a real possibility. That no one is hungry, no one is unhoused, no one is without a job, no one is without health care, no one is without access to education, access to all these things. Like no one is without that. And we absolutely can make that possible. And it takes courageous leadership, but not courageous leadership from on high. Courageous leadership right there next door to you, or across the street, or across town. That and then with that kind of rising up of moral compass in each and every one of us, then we can elect and support people who mirror our moral compass. And I know moral is a tricky word for people, because people will start to beat you to death with scripture and think that that's morality. They'll beat you to death with their own personal angst and isms, and they'll think that that's the compass. But the moral compass is, do unto others as you would do unto yourself. you know and the moral compass is, while these schools in these southern states want to post up the 10 commandments without actually reading the 10 commandments. I don't know why you're putting up 10 commandments in schools when you only want to feed these same kids. You want to read this damn thing. I don't get it, but okay. Because somehow or other, why don't you put that tattoo? Whoever feels like they need the 10 commandments, why don't they tattoo that on their own ass? And so that way they could be reminded about it. That's how I feel. Because I don't get the point of that. Because you could write anything you want on the wall. It's what you do. I'm still a James Baldwin devotee. I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. So we can't have a conversation about we care so much about children. Oh, we love children in this country. We love them so much that we allow them to be gunned down in their schools and playgrounds, and mosques and churches and synagogue. We don't have a problem with that. We care so much about children that we lock up antihistamines because it's dangerous. Oh, we care so much about children that we want to lock their brains up by not letting them read books that could help them see a future for themselves, a better future than what their parents and grandparents left. So we love children so much in this country that we don't want to give every child access to health care. That's how much we love children. We love children so much, you know. So we say one thing, but we do something entirely different. And I want people to reckon with that. We have an election coming up that is important. Every election is important. And I have to believe, and I was talking to Luciana and Nathan last night because I'm marrying them in July. I talked to them last night and he asked me, what, and people always ask me how do I feel about this election? How do I feel about this current state of things? I mean, if you listen to me every day, you know how I feel about the current state of things. Listen, there's a whole lot of foolishness, trash, mayhem, and lies, but there's also great beauty in things. So I always say we can see both things. We can see the pain and trauma of things as well as the beauty and glory in things. We can celebrate and have sorrow at the same time. So what I said was, I believe that men and women of good conscience knows what needs to happen, that they know what they need to do when they walk into these polls for this election, that they understand the assignment, that they understand that this country is in a crossroads and we cannot turn back clocks. We cannot turn back history. We cannot turn back any of these things. We have got to get ourselves positioned for the next adventure of a century. And we have to vote people in who have a vision for all of America. So I'm not worried, because this is what I also believe. America will get what America deserves. America will get what America deserves. That's all I could say. We will get what we deserve. And for all those people who were like, "Oh, I don't vote, cut it out. You have no problems hitting your cell phones for American Idol and voting for people that you like to sing and dance. This is important to your everyday practical life. and whatever the philosophy you believe in. And if you got to vote undemocratic, I mean, if you have to vote Republican, vote. Let the chips fall where they may. That's all I'm saying. So that's it. That's it. So I'm gonna have this wonderful, rich conversation with Louise Story and Ebony Reed in a few minutes. They're gonna come on, and I'm looking forward to it. So, because when it gets to the point where women got to raise the bar on stuff, it's pretty damn serious. And both these women are journalists and investigative journalists, and they know a thing or two. So they're gonna come on. They're gonna give us the good word about what has happened. So Harry, are we gonna start the music all over again and start a new segment? I just want to be prepared. which is fine by me, because then it could just start from them being on, and they don't have to deal with the first 20 minutes of me and my foolishness. Although this is the best job. This is the best job. And no, we haven't won any awards. We don't do this work for awards. Okay, that's what I'm publicly saying. But we're gonna get ourselves nominated for some awards, because people keep asking me. I was like, well, we know we throw ourselves in the ring. We throw ourselves in the ring, we might be able to do a thing or two. We got some good ass shows on WNHH 103.5. There's some good shows up here. Paul Bass, Baselines is good. Justin Time, I love it. The Jazz Show gets my vote every time for anything. CCM has a show up here. I just saw another show, something about lunch. So I was like, not you eat lunch, but a show on your lunch hour. So there's some great shows up here. People talking about some really interesting stuff. And it makes me feel good, because I can't get to everybody. I'm not going to get to everybody. I'm just not going to get to everybody. So, and the Weed Show, I swear to God, I watched the Weed Show on TV, on just like y'all watch it. I watch the radio. I swear to God, I can feel the get high just from the Weed Show, and I'm not even in the room. So I'm just saying. That's how that show affects me. I was like, man, that's a get high show, and it affects me. So good morning, Ebony Reed.
Good morning, Babz. It's nice to meet you.
It is lovely to meet you. Harry, are we starting all from fresh? Are we just gonna jump right in? You tell me. See, my producer's in another space. My studio is at
Okay.
my house, and he's downtown. Okay, so we can just jump in. So I had already talked about you, Ebony and
You did?
Louise. I talked about y'all already. Good morning, good morning. So
Good morning.
I already read your bios. I already talked about your book. So we're
Oh
gonna
my
have a
goodness.
great conversation, because people are really keyed in about this. And I thank you for coming on so quickly. I did not think I would be able to access y'all so quickly. I thought, because y'all are all over the place talking about 15 cents on a dollar. And so I was like, well, they're not gonna get around to me till August.
Well, I just want to say to you and your listeners that Connecticut is special to us. Not only do both of us teach at the Yale School of Management in New Haven, so we're New Haven
Yes.
girls, but I also attended Yale over 20 years ago. And I also live in Connecticut, more in Southern Connecticut, but I live in Connecticut. So we're really thrilled to be on with you all.
Oh, well,
Definitely.
thank you so much. So did y'all know each other before this book, before y'all wrote this book, or you met up at the School of Management and said, you know what, this money thing is this wealth gap, and this African American and white wealth gap is a real thing. Let's talk about it. How did this come about?
No, we knew each other well before Yale. Louise and I worked together at the Wall Street Journal. And in fact, in 2019, she recruited me to join her team. I was teaching at the University of Missouri, and she was setting up a new team at the Wall Street Journal. And so I joined her there, was working with her. And then that summer, that pandemic summer, we couldn't go anywhere. We were trapped in our homes. We started reading books and realized that there was no book that had been, created that was the entire history of the Black-white wealth gap that included contemporary people living today. And so we thought with our backgrounds, I've worked a lot in regional media, community journalism, worked at the Associated Press. Louise spent 12 years at the New York Times before she was at, the Wall Street Journal. She covered Wall Street during the economic crisis of 2008, 2009. I was in charge of local news at that time in Detroit. And we just thought that we'd be the perfect pair to tackle this topic.
Wow. This is fascinating stuff because, how to make a dollar out of 15 cents is a very black narrative, and it's a rap narrative. And here you come with this book. Talk to me about exactly what does this mean? The title, what does it mean? And how should people think about this?
Sure. So, a typical Black family has 15 cents in wealth for every $1 in wealth a typical white family has in America. And that comes from the Federal Reserve data that comes out every 3 years, a consumer finance survey. In terms of, what it means, we explore that through the lives of 7 people and their families that we chronicled over 3 years. And we show people their experiences that they had from, entrepreneurship to the impact of student loans, home ownership, affordable housing, issues that they faced. And so we take readers on a journey in this book. And so we hope people will read it. And we think it will also have them reflect on their own families too and their own stories, because all of the main people that we focus on, their family trees were traced back by us 5 to 6 generations.
Wow. So can you talk about this wealth gap? How much of history do you lay as a foundation to bring us to the present moment?
Actually, we take you through all of history of the US. We even have a little bit back in the 1700s. The book is mainly set from the mid 1800s to the present. And you'll have a new understanding of history by reading this book. We bring together financial history with broader American history, with a special focus on the financial history of Black and white Americans. So we don't cover just the hurdles that Black Americans face. We also cover the kind of big money spigots that gave money to white people, where Black people did not benefit as much, because the gap is affected by both the level of white wealth and the level of Black wealth. And so Ebony and I both in our college days studied history. She was a Black studies minor, and I was an American studies major at Yale. And this is a new slice of history that is not really covered very often for many reasons. But one reason is actually financial history is not often brought together with political, racial, and general American history.
And so do you lay out how much of wealth in this country was built on the backs of enslaved people? Is that the premise, the beginning of how the wealth disparity begins?
Yes, we do cover that. We cover the impact, of slavery, and then we move through history. So you see what happens with the redlining. You see what happens with, the GI Bill, when white Americans were able to use it significantly more than Black, veterans to purchase homes. And we explain what that has meant for some of the families that we chronicle. And we move all the way up through, the civil rights era. Then we bring you through to eventually the 2008, 2009, financial crisis.
And just to give you some numbers on that, we talk about the average Black family's wealth versus the average white family's wealth all the way from this time of the Civil War to the present day. So right at the time of the Civil War, the average white family had 58 times the wealth of the average Black family. And that wealth, a lot of it was the enslavement of people. And, when that ended, and we all celebrated the end of slavery last week with Juneteenth, and when that ended, that did bring the gap a little bit smaller, but it still remained huge. And there's many things along the way that got in the way of this gap closing and even widened it. So we cover all that. And we also cover the way the financial system has been built, the insurance and banking system, with approaches to risk pricing that end up having racial implications. And that goes
Mm.
back to things, insurance contracts in the 1800s.
But Louise, we're still seeing that, right? Because we've seen banks slapped for not lending to Black people or higher interest
Yep.
rates to Black people, or saying we will only lend to you if you buy in particular, redlining in particular communities and neighborhoods. So tell me, when you wrote this book, the goal was to do what?
Our number one goal is to spread the statistic, 15 cents on the dollar. We are trying to make that a nationally recognized statistic so that more people understand what the Black-white wealth gap is. We
Mm-hmm.
think if more people understand the actual data, that it will impact conversations across our country in a range of areas that include student loans, affordable housing, the criminal justice system, because all of those areas intersect with the gap.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
there
so
are
how do
surveys that show that a huge number of Americans think the Black-white wealth gap has gone away. And so it's really essential that people have the right information about how big this gap is and what stands to happen to it if current policies remain. 15 cents on the dollar is the level of this gap from the 1950s. It moved around after the 1950s. It went up to 22 cents on the dollar in the early 1990s, but it has fallen. And so, it's important people understand that the things that have occurred since the 1950s, the civil rights movement, many things have occurred that have made progress in many areas, but they have not made a lasting dent on this gap. And so if you wanted to change this gap, you got to first understand it and then talk about new pathways that it might be decreased.
Mm. So when we talk about pathways, I imagine, Louise and Ebony, that you can't talk about this wealth gap without talking about all the other gaps that affect Black and white America. You can't talk, you have to talk about the education gap. You have to talk about the health gap. How does this fit in, or does it, or is this the umbrella?
So the wealth gap is the umbrella, and then we begin to dive into other areas. We have a whole chapter in the book about bankruptcy because Black Americans are less likely to have their debts forgiven in bankruptcy court than white Americans. And so what that means is that as white Americans have more forgiveness of their debt in bankruptcy court, then that also contributes to, widening the gap.
Mm-hmm. And so now, do you get this book in front of politicians? Do you get this book in front of educators? Do you get this book in front of policymakers? Like, how do you have these conversations around the country when the country right now is so focused on this upcoming election and all the foolishness that's going on with that? How do you get this message out there? How do you make it so that it's palatable for people to understand?
Well, there's a reason we came on your program. We want to get this out there. We appreciate people like you having us on. And also, when people read the book, we've had some early readers, they really like it. They find that the narratives of these people, we have very interesting people in the book, including, for example, Killer Mike, the rapper who has won
Mm-hmm.
3 Grammys. This is the most in-depth look at his family and him that's ever been published, and it goes through their financial history. And we have Andrew Young, who was a civil rights leader and then the mayor of Atlanta. Again, we found out things about Andrew Young's grandparents that he didn't know that affected their whole trajectory. And we go through his life and we assess his tenure as mayor, and we talk about his approach to capitalism versus Dr. Martin Luther King's approach to capitalism. And the storylines are so interesting and compelling. Other people in the book have had tragedies happen. For example, one of the people in our book, during 2020, his father was shot by the police. So you follow in our book his quest for justice, and you understand all of the things around the Black-white wealth gap that affected his family. And he's in a biracial marriage, and you see how his white wife's family had a different trajectory from his own family. And so these narratives are so gripping that I don't think you can read a more interesting novel of fiction. This is one of those, like, you can't make it up. It's compelling. It's real life. It's interesting. It's meaty. And through these stories, people will not only know the data and learn the history, but you're also going to just feel for these people. And so we think that this is it is the first book that's a comprehensive book in the Black White Wealth Gap, and we think it's a book that can break out as a general audience read because it's not a textbook. It's not academic.
I was gonna ask you, Louise, is this an academic book? Because
No,
No.
this can be read by people in high school, college, adults. You can read it on the beach. You can read it anywhere because you're really reading these stories of people. And along the way, you'll get these financial concepts and the data, but it is not academic. And that was a very big focus of how we approach this.
And so now, does the book, it gives you the history, lays out some things. Does it give you some tools or some suggestions or some ideas of how we could dismantle or close this wage gap, this wealth gap?
Well, we have some personal recommendations. We don't give policy recommendations because as journalists, that's not what we do. Among our personal recommendations, one is to advocate for wealth transparency. Louise and I, as we're going around, we've been having community symposiums. You asked how we're spreading this information since February. So we've been around the country since then. Probably at this point, we visited like 15 cities, and we hold these talks that include a reading of the book and also data to help people understand. And we encourage people to advocate for wealth transparency because the data that we have only comes out from the federal government every 3 years, and it's not at a granular level. So it doesn't include geography. It's only a national look. It doesn't include gender. It's only, household by race. So that's one. The other thing that we encourage people to do is at some point in their lifetime to participate in, to do a meaningful project, if they are able to, with the person who is different from them, and to do it in partnership. And doing a project in partnership does not mean you hire someone and have them do exactly what you say. It means that you have equal say and that you work together as close in an equitable situation as you can. And so Louise and I have done that with this book. Even though we started out in a relationship where she was my boss, in order for us to do this book, we did it as partners. And we just think if more people had that experience, that it would shape their knowledge, their empathy for people who are of different backgrounds. To the visible eye, Louise is white and I'm Black. But we also have other differences that we had to work through to create this book. She lives on the East Coast. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. She's married and has 3 children. I was widowed in the pandemic and I don't have children. And so that, working through family structure, and those sort of dynamics at the same time we're doing this book really caused us to look at, what does equity and equality mean? And if you're working together as partners, it can't be the same thing from every person at the same time because everyone doesn't have the same amount of hours to put in or the same amount of money. And so we had to really work through those issues while we were also reporting on, the Black-white wealth gap.
I love that you said, what is equity? What does equity inclusion mean? Like, I like that because I think that's the next step for having a larger conversation about these wealth gaps, because everybody throws those words around, but what do they actually mean in everybody's everyday, ordinary, practical lives? Like, what does that mean? So all right, but policymakers could take this book and create policy. I could see Cory Booker reading this book and be like, okay, I see what needs to be done, or Maxine, or any of them.
We want to get the book.
Yeah, I just to take your thought further, I agree. Policymakers definitely can make policy out of this, even though this book is apolitical. This book could be read by people of any political leaning. It's relevant. We've had both conservative and liberal people already start reading it, and they really like it. It can be read by all ages. It can be read by all races. It can be read by all economic levels. It's highly relevant to everyone. But yes, when policymakers read this, and they get these actual stories of people, which is kind of rare. I mean, people talk about money. It's really kind of rare to be able to go so in depth in the way people handle money.
Because money is very personal to people, Louise.
Yeah.
Like, people don't like to say how much they make, or they don't want to say how much they spent for a car. I mean, people are very, very tight about talking about finances.
That's right. Well, we are really grateful to the people who opened up with us, and they've shared these stories publicly. And I think that is a gift to the world that they shared their stories. But when policymakers read this, we have really pointed out a lot of places where there's something we call money over morals thinking, where in our
Ooh,
systems, people are doing things that maybe are not in line with even what they say their morals are, but because it benefits them financially. And we pointed out a number of areas like this, and a number of areas where, for example, risks are really placed on individuals rather than on communities. And we've questioned whether that's fair. One example would be auto insurance. So, in New Haven, for example, or in any community in Connecticut, basically, depending on where you live, your auto insurance is based on your zip code, the pricing. And if you live in a zip code that has higher crime, you got to pay more for auto insurance than someone who lives in, like, I don't know, New Canaan or somewhere that has less crime. And so how is this fair? Just because you live somewhere, maybe you're not involved in crime at all. Just because you live somewhere, you've got to pay higher. And by the way, the people paying more for auto insurance tend to have less money, and they tend to be Black and Hispanic. So it's not priced based on race, but it has a racial result, a racial pattern. And so that's when we raise the question is like, should the cost of this higher crime area be paid by individuals in their auto insurance, or should that community and the community government or some other way? Of course, the company wants to be paid for the risk, right? If someone breaks in the car, but should there be other ways of handling the risk? So we raise a lot of particular questions like that are really at the nexus of community, government, and business and finance. And we raise questions around those things. And so policymakers who wanted to look for things to do will certainly see a lot of the problems, and we leave it to them to come up with the solutions, but they'll see them very much explained in the book.
wow. That's pretty fascinating because it's these small nuanced things, Ebony and Louise, that I don't think everyday people think about. Like, I don't think I live in Newhallville. I don't think people are thinking, oh, I'm paying more tax. I'm paying a higher price because I live in this neighborhood. They're just going about their lives thinking, oh, well, this is what it is. I'll pay it. Not thinking that it is not so much about, it's not based on race, but it has racial undertones in it. That's pretty stunning. I wonder if we could go back and say, don't penalize me because I live in this neighborhood. I wonder if people could go back and say that to their providers and say, listen, I know this is because of this. So, all right, so you're going around the country talking about this book. What do you hope that you want this book to do? What is the hope? Are you doing workshops? I know you're doing symposiums. Is there another book behind this one to really get people on board? What is your hope and goals and wishes for this?
Well, our number one goal remains to make 15 cents on the dollar a nationally recognized statistic. We also are really focused on helping educate the public about the difference between wealth and income, which is something I wanted to mention because a lot of times people are confused about it. So wealth is everything that you own minus everything that you owe, and also referred to as net worth. And a lot of times when we start talking to people about the wealth gap, they may start talking about income, and they may say, oh, well, I know people at my job who are of different races or who are Black and they make as much as me. No, income and wealth are different. Income can be an input into wealth, but it is not the same thing.
Wow, that's a whole, you just gave us a master's class right there. I don't think people know. I don't think people know that. So was there anything that when you were doing the research for this book, when you're talking to people or listening to people, did anything come up in this book that you did not know or you were surprised to know in pulling all this stuff together?
I think the number one thing that but there were some personal revelations actually for me and Ebony, but in terms of a shared big revelation, the number one thing I think, and Ebony, tell me if you agree with this, was the very strong impact of the justice system on the Black-white wealth gap. And I'm not talking just the criminal system. I'm also talking the civil system. For example, as Ebony said, we cover bankruptcy in the book. That's in the civil system. But both the criminal and civil system. And it has a very big impact on the gap. And we explore that in a chapter. And in our work that's outside the book, Ebony is the chief strategy officer of the Marshall Project, which it's a nonprofit news outlet that covers the justice system. And I am on the board, I joined the board after doing this reporting in the book because I was so revved up about the justice system. I joined the board of the Prison Journalism Project.
I know that project.
It's an amazing project. I volunteer with them. We go into prison facilities and we train people in journalism and writing, which are skills they can use in any kind of jobs when they get out. We also help them publish their journalism. And if they're in a state that allows them to get paid, which not all states do, we get them paid when we publish their work. And so this is changing people's lives and economics. And I wanted, as a journalist, a lot of times you just observe things, you write your book, you walk away. And I wanted to do something that would still be within the ethics of journalism that would actually help people in the system. So that really surprised us. At the most basic level, I'm going to give you another financial concept. Hope you don't mind, but you've got a couple MBA professors. At the most basic level, it's the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the concept that says, well, I'm doing this thing over here, but I could have done that thing over there. So the opportunity cost is when someone is in prison, they're not working for much pay. Often they're not working for any pay, or if they are working, it's very, very low pay.
Like 25 cents an hour or something.
Yeah.
It's small.
Yeah. So think about their families. A lot of people look at the justice system and they think only about the person in there, which, by the way, the person in there is important too. And we care about all people. But let's just go beyond that and say, think about their children, think about their spouse, all these families. And so, we raise some questions about, why can't people work and get paid while they're in prison? And what happens when they come out with their ability to get a job? And why do certain come out? There's certain types of debt that keep building up while people are in prison. And, so it's really the justice
like
system,
child support.
Yeah, like child support. It builds up.
Uh-huh.
It keeps going. And then people get out and their wages are garnished over it. And so, and they can't even get a job. And then, the civil system, where there is a difference between what you can get in bankruptcy, statistically speaking, if you're Black versus if you're white. So we raise all this so people understand that the justice system has a financial toll, and the way it's playing out right now, it is setting Black families back versus white families. So that really was a big one. Ebony, you probably have something to add on that.
No, I think you covered that really well. But one thing that I do want to add, because I do want the listeners to know that for us, this is a public impact project. And what that means is that Louise has donated and pledged to continue to donate all of her profits from this book to nonprofits, and I have donated a share of mine. And the nonprofits that we have focused on are those that, are doing work around women empowerment, education, and journalism with the lens on Black Americans.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful. So I appreciate this conversation because I feel like this book can be used as a book in high school as well as college. Like I don't think there's no place that this book should not be read, because I think it's quite illuminating. I don't have the book in front of me, but I'm gonna make it my business to go to my local independent bookseller and order my copy so that I can read and be well versed. So one last thing before you go, because I know y'all have to go teach and do all kinds of stuff. When people read this book, what do you want them to really lean into? Like, what's the part that you want them to lean into? Do you want them to read this book and then go do a project? Do you want them to read this book and go talk to their neighbors? Do you want them to read this book, take it to their church? Like, are there some actionable steps that you'd like to see?
Yes, we want them to, first of all, read it and spread the word about this data through the book. They should tell people about the book. But also, if there's people they're friends with who aren't big readers, not everyone reads big books, then they should just tell them about the data. We made the title of our book 15 cents in the dollar because we're okay with, even if people don't read it, if they hear us on your program this morning, they're learning. Right now, they're learning. The typical Black family has 15 cents in wealth compared to the $1 in wealth held by the typical white family. So right there, that's impact. And you've helped us today. Thank you. And so we want people to spread that so that will help people have a better assessment of where society stands. We want them to do that. But then we also want them to look into whatever they do. Everyone does something different. Some people run teams at tech companies. Some people are involved in the community at their church. Some people are involved in the PTA. Some people are teachers. In every area, some people are doctors, that people work.
Mhm.
there is room today for them to look at the systems and the incentives that are going through them, which is what we question in the book. And if they read the book, they'll better understand what we mean by this and say, what are systems here that, may not be focused on treating one race differently than another race, but are landing differently for different groups based on race? And how can we change that? And there's really a lot that's happening that's landing that way. And so people can look within what they do. One thing we identified just within book publishing is that, the bestseller list, bookstores have to report to the New York Times and other places about their book sales. Well, a lot of Black-owned bookstores are really small and don't have the manpower to report them. And we've been really pushing to support Black-owned bookstores. If you go on our website, 15cents.info, 15cents.info, you'll see we put a lot of Black bookstores up, but they don't all report to the best-selling list. And so that's like a system that's self-perpetuating. So you say like, well, if you buy it at a Black-owned bookstore, which maybe more Black people are shopping at, then the book doesn't get on the bestseller list. And if it isn't on the bestseller list, then the sales don't go as much and publishers don't publish. And if you haven't had a bestseller and you go for a contract, it affects your prospects of getting another one. So we question those things. So we want people to start questioning the world around them with these concepts that they'll get in the book.
Boy, Louise, that was a whole other masterclass right there. I don't even think people even knew that was it. You just gave everybody something that they didn't even know that was it, which is pretty powerful. Knowledge is power. That's pretty damn good. I didn't even know that. I want to thank you both for coming on so quickly this morning, for spending the time talking about this book. It's up on the websites, so I want people to go and check it out and follow along Ebony Reed and Louise Story on their journey to raise the awareness around us talking about the data on this thing, and be in these spaces where we can talk about it. I'm going to be talking about it in my friend group, so don't you worry. And I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. 15 cents on the dollar. Thank you.
And thank you, Tabira Armand, for the hookup.
She's the best. She's the best.
She is wonderful.
Oh yeah, she is. She is a wonderful person, and she was right on about this. So 15 cents on a dollar, the new book by Ebony Reed and Louise Story about the black-white wealth gap in America. Thank y'all.
Bye. Be well. And great to see you.
All right. Great to see you. I hope I see you soon. Take good
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye. All right, Harry, we're going to take a break. I'll be back at 10:15. This is a good conversation.
It must have been moonglow.
That's my girl right there.
Way up in the blue.
Hi, this is Babz Rawls-Ivy from New Haven, Connecticut, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, streaming live at newhavenindependent.org.
Hold me fast, and I started praying.